The Gleaming Depths update introduced a whole host of new content, including so many different weapons. In the last video of this series, we covered the extremely fun to use Boiling Point Flamer, so if you haven't seen that, make sure you do. It'll be in the description. And today we'll be covering the newly added unique railway rifle, the Lickety Split. Is this gun a letdown or is it a diamond in the rough? Let's figure that out together. I know this weapon has the community somewhat divided on the forums, but let's dive deeper into it and see if we could actually get to the bottom of how good this weapon is. So before we get into the gun, let's talk about how you could get one of these bad boys for yourselves. Obviously, if you can't tell, just like all the weapons in this little series that we're doing, it could be obtained from the Gleaming Depths raid, but specifically you could get your hands on one of these in Stage 4, and it has a 10% drop chance. So Stage 4, you beat it, you have 10% chance to get one of these weapons for yourself, and obviously the plan for the weapon could also be gotten from the same stage, so Stage 4, but it has a 5% drop chance. So don't freak out, I promise it's pretty easy to get, even if you're a little bit of a lower player. Chances are you could probably get a carry or two through the raid enough times to get one of these. Just try and join random raid teams, and if you're low level, like I say, join a random raid team and pray that you don't get kicked. But it does suck that it's kind of at the end of the raid, so it is a little bit more difficult to get your hands on one of these, because most people, at least if you're a lower level, you're going to join a random raid team, and they're probably going to be farming just the first boss, because most people have already gotten all of these weapons. So if you're not able to do this raid content with yourself or with a couple of your friends, I do understand it's going to be very difficult to come across. All right, so now that you know how to get it, let's go through the legendary effects and let's talk about what makes this weapon so special. Obviously, I'll go through these effects real quick, and then I'll talk about them a little bit more in depth and see how well they synergize with each other. So first up, we have the Juggernaut's effect. Deal or damage increases up to 25% as health increases. So this one is for all you full health builds. Crippling plus 50% limb damage, which is always pretty nice. Resilient plus 250 damage resistance while reloading, which is kind of useless. And then a new 4-star, which is Fracturers. When crippling limbs, they explode and deal up to 50 explosive damage to nearby targets. Minus 20% base physical damage, which is kind of the big hit of this weapon. And then obviously, because it has the Fracturers, projectiles explode into shrapnel for 38 physical damage. So that's always a nice little bonus too. So as you can see, this weapon, though, it has some nice synergy going on with the limb damage and that Fracturers effect, but that 4-star also comes in pretty handy when it comes to tagging enemies. That's going to be really nice. All you have to do is cripple an enemy's limb at an event, and then boom, you tag all the other enemies. So if you don't have a Tesla rifle or a Tesla cannon, this is a nice alternative to that. And it does come with a pretty heavy drawback, as you saw. I touched on it briefly, that minus 20% physical damage, which definitely takes this weapon down a few notches in terms of DPS. Don't get me wrong, it's still a railway, just one that does 20% less damage, but that 4-star effect can help produce some extra DPS, but obviously just not enough to compete with the meta. It is nice that it is a Juggernaut's weapon, and if you can use it if you're a full health build, but again, they do kind of smack you in the face with minus 20% physical damage. If that wasn't a thing, then all of the full health builds out there would be running this 100% no problem, because it would be basically the best full health railway or unique railway that you could get in the game. One of the best full health weapons that you could get in the game. But again, that minus 20% physical damage kind of sucks. It kind of ruins the weapon entirely. But let's see if that 4-star can make up for it. And then, as per usual, right before we jump into the testing, I just wanted to go over the weapon stats and some interesting details about this weapon. So the weapon stats at level 50 base stats, no additional perk cards boosting damage. The damage is 76. The area damage is 38 because of that extra shrapnel damage. The magazine is 10 and the AP cost is 20. So you could definitely feel and see that minus 20% damage taking effect effect right off the bat there, unfortunately, compared to any other base railway. And then even compared to a bloody railway, it gets even worse. And then obviously I wanted to mention the look of this weapon. Just all of the raid weapons have this nice little specific enclave look. But, I had to mention it. This one looks really nice. It has that nice enclave symbol on the side, really nice together. And that orange plus wood looks really nice. But somehow, it doesn't really matter because not too many people are going to use this. It is just a really nice looking weapon. I wish that you would be able to take the skin and throw it on any other weapon once you scrap this weapon, but unfortunately you can't. So let's see how this weapon handles in the wasteland. It looks good, but is it a good gun? All right, we've been dipping our toes in the water long enough. It's time to jump in and talk about the testing of this bad boy. If you saw my last raid weapon video or any of my other weapon reviews, you'll know how I'll start these. I'll start with how the weapon is against lower level, weaker enemies, and then work our way up to how this thing is against like tougher enemies, and then obviously bosses and everything like that. So let's start out with the low level tier enemies, your mole miners, your scourge, your ghouls. Obviously, without any real doubt, the Lickety Split can handle itself just fine against a lower tier enemies like your mole miners, ghouls, scourge. It's still a railway, so if you throw this thing comes auto too, so it's really nice. You'll be blasting through these lower enemies, no problem. Can't really say too much about that because we know it's a damn railway rifle. It should be able to handle itself against these enemies, and it definitely does. Like I said, if you go into White Spring and you shoot a ghoul in the leg, you'll basically just cause its limb to cripple, and then it'll cause an explosion, and then you just keep doing that. So you just switch to enemy, switch to enemy, switch to enemy. It'll only take a couple shots, and you'll just be crippling all of the limbs, and then obviously causing the explosions to pop up, which is really nice. And then if you're running a full health, high AP build, this weapon should be a mainstay for all of you people that are running those builds out there. It really is nicely suited for that. The AP cost is a little high, but I mean, hey, it's a railway. You can just mod this weapon to make it a little bit better in terms of that usage. But against these enemies, everyone knew it would be 100% valid, and it obviously is. Now, moving on to your mid-tier enemies like your super mutants and higher armor enemies like Snallygasters, this thing could still carry its own weight without any real problems. If you go into the West Tech, you'll be able to clear it really without any issues. Again, you can really utilize this thing if you're a full health build, and of course, don't forget this weapon is great at tagging, so if you're using it at like Eviction Notice with all the Super Mutants or Rad Rumble, I know those are lower tier enemies with the ghouls and everything, but again, you could just really tag nice with this. You'll be able to kill Super Mutants from the explosion and from the shrapnel damage. However, though, obviously, the damage really does start to taper off here. You really can tell. You're like, oh, okay, the super mutant didn't die in one shot or didn't die in two shots. Okay, well, my bloodied explosive railway with all these perk cards 100% will make this guy die in one shot. So obviously, just keep that in mind. You're going to be seeing the footage. You're going to say, well, it's obviously doing okay, but I mean, it's just not as good as any other railway out there, or really as good as they could have made this railway. But again, that 4-star legendary effect definitely does help you clear out some more enemies. I guess it's decent for mobbing. It's not too terrible. Now, I also wanted to cover your extremely tough bosses. So, but you're not really extremely tough bosses, but you're tough-ish bosses, like your Mirelurk Queen, super mutant behemoth type enemies, and everything like that. I mean, it's really nice for crippling them, so that's somewhat makes up for the straight loss and DPS. I mean, but if you just had the additional damage, like if you just had the 20% damage, you could just kill these enemies without really having to worry about crippling them and making them not able to attack you. So it is what it is. I mean, it still gets the job done. And then obviously against your nuke type enemies, you'll have a very hard time going against them. But I mean, unlike most of the weapons from this raid, it can have the purpose of actually helping your team with these harder enemies. So you could just cripple them. It is awesome at crippling. So if you are fighting the queen or anything like that, you could keep her down on the ground, the Scorch Beast Queen, just by crippling her wings and her legs and everything. So it really is nice, which could increase your target's DP or increase your team's DPS and actually reduce your target's DPS, which is a great way to contribute to the group effort. So there you go. Perfect. That's not that terrible. And now, obviously, I wanted to just mention the raid content because this thing comes from the raid. It's it's okay. Obviously, it kind of sucks. You won't really be using this thing in your raid rotation like a Bloodied Railway or a Gatlin Plasma, so you don't really have to worry about that. You can't really use it in the content that you get it from, but it is what it is, right? All right, now that the testing is over with and you've seen how this weapon performs throughout the entirety of this video, let's talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly with this weapon, starting off with the good, or at least the positives that I see this weapon having. So, like I've mentioned so many times throughout this video, the biggest positive I see from this weapon is its ability to tag so many enemies during larger events, so it's really nice in that sense that that 4-star effect really comes in handy at tagging those enemies with a nice AoE attack. However, I mean, you could still tag a lot more enemies and it'll be a lot easier without using VATS if you just with a stock Tesla rifle. So I guess, I mean, pick your battles. It's okay. It's yeah, I mean, it's okay, But another huge positive, the biggest one that I really see besides the tagging, is the fact that the 4-star of this weapon is actually really, really, really powerful. Like I said, it's great for clearing out so many lower level mobs. If you go into the group of White Springs and just shoot one ghoul in the leg after basically they're all hoarded up, most of them will be done. It's like running a train in zombies and shooting them with the thunder gun. But again, I do understand that minus 20% damage, it kind of kills the power of this weapon. But again, that 4-star effect is really nice, and it is a somewhat saving grace for this weapon. It would be a useless weapon if it was not for that 4-star effect. And then I also just wanted to quickly mention, just to go off that 4-star effect being so powerful, it does allow you to cripple more limbs. So that really, really does help during those queens and during those larger boss fights. Like I said, if you cripple the queen, she won't be able to get away. And the queen obviously is the best nuke event. If you know, you know. But yeah, you could really just keep your enemies completely pinned down, and you'll actually be able to help the team a little bit more. And I also just wanted to quickly mention as a positive, I know it's not the best full health weapon in the entire world because of the minus 20% base damage, but if you are a full health build and if you do run a VATS build in particular with full health, you definitely should have this thing on your rotation. Just especially if you don't have any god tier weapons. I mean, this one's kind of made for you, and it's still a railway, right? It looks sexy, it does some damage, and it is pretty useful during those giant nuke event boss fights, particularly the queen. And if you watched any of my other raid specific weapon videos, you know what I'm about to say. Every rose has its thorn, every yin has its yang, and every positive has its negative. There obviously are some bad features that come with this weapon if you can't tell already, so let's get into those. The first negative that I want to talk about is basically the gatekeeping of this weapon. You're not really going to be able to get this weapon if you can't get a carry through the raid. So if you're a lower level player, or if you just can't, if you're a higher level player that just can't solo the raids because you don't have the equipment, you're not going to be able to get your hands on this weapon, which kind of sucks because it's not that good of a weapon. If you can't farm the raids reliably, you're shit out of luck because you have to get to the 4th stage, which sucks. So you basically have to complete the entire raid besides the boss fight, which takes some people like a half an hour, and it's not a 100% drop. And I know some people can complete the raid in 35 seconds, but hey, you're still gonna have to go through and do the 4th stage probably like 3 or 4 times to get this weapon, and it's just honestly not worth it. So by the time that you can do that content, you're gonna throw it out and you're gonna scrap it. So it kind of sucks. It doesn't really complete its objective. And then the biggest downside that I could see from this weapon, 100% without a doubt, everyone knows it, is the fact that it has that damn minus 20% physical base damage. It doesn't make any sense. This weapon wouldn't be a 10 out of 10 game breaking weapon without that negative damage, so it just doesn't make sense. It's literally just Bethesda shitting on a weapon for no reason, and it's a smack in the face to all you full health builds out there. I don't understand it. Todd was really fucking smoking something when he came up with this one, because it just misses the entire point of what a railway should be. And then obviously coming off of that, I want to talk about that low DPS. For a railway, this thing sucks in terms of DPS. I know that I keep saying the 4-star effect can help it sometimes, but it won't always save you. And if you just go up in any situation, a bloodied railway with the explosive effect or any other effect will be better than this thing. So you might as well just scrap it and try and get fractures as like a plan or something like that, and put it on a better weapon. And then finally, I know we're shitting on this weapon a bit, but I just have one more negative thing to talk about that, and it doesn't benefit from fucking Demolition Expert, which is pretty nuts because it's fucking explosive. That's the entire point of the weapon. It's just another reason why they killed the DPS of this beautiful weapon. They just didn't think it through. I just don't understand what they were. I guess everyone was just fucking taking the week off when they made this thing. It doesn't make any sense. Well, ladies and gents of the Wasteland, we've made it to the end of another Fallout 76 video. As you could tell by this video, I am kind of personally disappointed in this weapon. It looks so damn good, and they just butchered it. The 4-star effect is probably the funnest 4-star effect that they've added in the entire game, and the 20% damage just kills the whole fun of this weapon. It sucks. You don't want to use it. Nothing can really save this weapon because of that minus 20% damage. And you think, oh, well, I'll just throw on Demolition Expert and I'll make up for that some of that damage. Nope, it sucks. It doesn't make any sense. It's a smack in the face. It's worthless. It's so frustrating. What do you think about this weapon? Let me know in the comments. This may be your favorite raids weapon that you've gotten so far, but to me, it's definitely not. I prefer the Resolve Breaker over this, even though that thing's a fucking flashbang. But, as always, I just want to thank you motherfuckers for watching this motherfucking video, and I will see you all in the Wasteland, hopefully rocking our orange railway rifles.